saw Srila Prabhupada. What is your first impression when you saw Srila Prabhupada?
Well, in the sense that I was not a devotee any standing at that particular point, I was just beginning to kind of understand what the movement was all about, beginning to understand what Prabhupada was about. I recognized that he was, through listening to him in his classes, that he was, a very, not just a learned man, but a very kind of sober person who I could appreciate what he was saying, even though I didn't know the theology that well. He spoke in a way I think that reached out to people, whether they were theologically trained or not. He was a very practical speaking person, as well as being a very practical person.
Yes.
And so I could see that there was charisma attached to this man, that there was something very unique and special about him. Even if I didn't understand at that point all the ways in which that was true, and certainly not all the ways in which the devotees themselves understood that to be true. But I thought that I was in the presence of somebody special, and somebody who had something to offer that I should be paying attention to. In ways that, in ways that I might not have been at that point, because I wasn't a religion student.
Yeah.
I didn't know the theology.
Yeah.
I wasn't even terribly interested in religion at that point in time, honestly. I was interested in the people that were there. I was interested in, because my studies at that point were in the study of social movements. My interest was in political movements, but I was training with some outstanding people at UCLA in the study of social movements. So the way I began thinking about it intellectually was ISKCON itself was, in fact, a social movement, and that I could use the kind of theoretical approaches within the study of social movements to understand ISKCON itself. So, part of any social movement that ultimately catches fire, so to speak, is there's almost always a charismatic figure who people are drawn to and attracted to. It provides a kind of inspirational. So I began seeing him in that particular way, and I began seeing ISKCON itself in terms of a movement and the ways in which it was developing as a movement itself. And so that was my approach. And other people that were studying new religious movements at that time, many of them were in fact sociologists. At the time, people from religious studies began studying them. But it was a phenomenon that really sociologists, some anthropologists, but mostly sociologists were being drawn to. And so that was the way that these movements were being analyzed by scholars, because they were in predominance, they were sociologists rather than religion scholars. So I actually knew virtually nothing about the theology of the movement.
Okay.
And I would even, this is kind of a criticism that I think was really apparent then, and maybe even still apparent today, is the theology wasn't to me the most important thing, which is a funny statement to make, I realize. To the extent that theology was important to me was the ways in which theology was situated in a particular context in which people were practicing that theology. And I was always interested in the context itself and how that was the way that shaped the ways they were interpreting and acting upon that theology. So those were the kinds of things that were more interesting to me. The philosophical side of it, or the theological side of it, actually were less important to me. And I say that now, somewhat embarrassed and quite critical of the way I was approaching the movement.
So thank you so much for those comments. Now you are studying this almost 40 plus years.
Yes.
So as a young researcher, I have some questions, some doubts, but the biggest influence on me coming from India here, I again reconnected to the Vedic roots when Srila Prabhupada's first generation disciples are giving Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, they trusted someone coming from a foreign land, foreign language, foreign culture, and that faith really, is the basis of my faith. So after that, I've been with this movement for and Vaishnavas and ISKCON for last 4-5 years, and more closely in last 2-3 years. So I see so many good things, so many things. This basically the whole philosophy that is coming from the Vedic background to offer to the whole world. You are studying for 40 plus years. So what are the some things that are so unique and you felt this movement has contributed to the world?
Well, there's some obvious things that I mean, at that particular time in America, to be a vegetarian was to be somebody who was a bit odd.
Okay.
It wasn't. It's not that there weren't people that were vegetarian, but vegetarianism itself had not, by any means, the kind of acceptance that it has today. So I think ISKCON itself has played a role in promoting that, actually. So I think, in that way, I think that had an immediate impact on the culture itself. I think also, these. I think we have to think about the people who were drawn to the movement to kind of get a sense of why it may have been important as really culturally, actually, is, the young people that were drawn to Prabhupada were people that were looking for a very different way of life. They were, in that time period, as you well know, the Vietnam War was very much in progress. There was a lot of things, there were protests going on that followed and was co-determinous with the civil rights movement that was taking place. So there was a lot of kind of dissent, sometimes angry dissent, towards American culture itself. So I think what Prabhupada was offering was an alternative to all that. That he was offering the culture, he was particularly offering to these young people who were very often part of what was spoken of and continues to be as the counterculture of that particular era. And they were really looking for something that was a real functioning alternative to American society. It wasn't just that Prabhupada had a set of values that were different than American values, but there were also values that Prabhupada had a plan for. The Vedic culture represented an alternative, a practical alternative to American culture. And it's still very much a practical alternative to American culture, even with all the changes that have taken place. And so I think really he established something in this culture, and ISKCON established something in this culture that became a model for people that were in other ways disillusioned with American culture, that they could do something that could create an alternative, a functional alternative, because many of these countercultural movements or communal movements of that period, they came and went very quickly. Because there was no kind of philosophy that was behind the way of living, and there was no ultimate sense of, if we create this alternative, we can change the world. And those early devotees felt very much that way. I think they were drawn as much to the idea that they could live a lifestyle and model a lifestyle that could change America. That it wasn't just something that was just for them, but it was something that was going to have an impact beyond ISKCON. It was going to model something that the American public could see. Well, these people are doing something that they have a lifestyle and a way of life that is appealing and makes sense. And now, did it reach that grand vision in terms of the struggles that ISKCON's had? Well, not exactly, but at the same time, I think people have now realized something about Hinduism, they realize something about Krishna consciousness that they otherwise probably would not have heard. Because even when the immigration that came to America beginning in 1965, when Prabhupada came, and the immigration laws changed in this country, yes, there were many Indian people who came, You know, the figures are astounding, the number who came from the late 60s, the 70s, and 80s going forward. But they were immigrants who probably would not have had a great influence on the average American person. It would have been something that was contained within the immigrant community. But the fact that Prabhupada was attracting these Westerners meant that it had a grander kind of cultural relevance. Even if people were arguing against the Hare Krishnas, they were still promoting the idea that there was this alternative, and there was this Krishna consciousness who they, in time, learned kind of fit within, broadly, this Hindu tradition. So I think it also gave legitimacy to people aspiring to and committing themselves to a set of religious ideas that were very much out of the American mainstream. And I think they really set the stage for that being true. So those are some of the things I think that make me think that this movement was significant, even above and beyond, I think, the ways that devotees sometimes think of it. Because they think, well, we didn't succeed. Well, we did succeed in ways that, yeah, there are vibrant ISKCON communities everywhere. And you can lose sight of the ways in which the movement does influence that culture. But in fact, it did have an influence. And I think this is compatible in part with what you're saying, is, as a sociologist, I think what I'm most attracted by and see the brilliance of Prabhupada actually is, and it's kind of astounding in a way. I mean, obviously Prabhupada was an educated person. He was a learned person in so many ways. But he comes to America and he didn't really know American culture with any great degree, right?
Yes.
And yet, without that understanding, he was able to understand American culture rather quickly, in fact, very quickly, so that he understood how to reach out to American young people in a way that you wouldn't imagine that somebody who had just come from India would. Now, from a devotee's point of view, that may be, well, that he's a spiritually inspired soul and was able to know that because of that. But I think of it as, here's a person who's all of that, but he understood American culture and he worked from the principle of time, place, and circumstance, which to me is the greatest kind of sociological insight that Prabhupada had. And time, place, and circumstance meant he wanted to bring Krishna consciousness to the Western world, but he also understood how to do it. He understood how to do it. There were plenty of Hindus, spiritualists who came from India and other parts of the world who came and failed rather quickly. And I think they came and failed kind of quickly because they didn't, one, understand the nature of American culture so that they could attract people. And, as you say, he did come at the right time. He came at a time when there was unrest in this country and people were actually looking for an alternative that Prabhupada brought here very concretely. So context combined with, I think, Prabhupada's insight, quickly sort of perceived right from the beginning that he could begin to attract people, and he knew how to talk to American people, and he, using the notion of time, place, and circumstance, it's not that he changed his Vaishnava beliefs, but he knew how to tailor those beliefs so that American young people could find it attractive. So somebody else could have come, or it's a combination of things. I've said this to devotees sometimes, and they kind of get a little baffled when I say, suppose Prabhupada had come in the 1950s. Do you think he would have been as successful? Well, maybe he would have. But he came at a moment in time where the culture itself was being questioned, and being questioned by a very specific generation of people. Prabhupada caught on to that. He understood that. He didn't go after, like some of these gurus who came from India. A lot of these women, upper class women's groups would invite Guru X, Y, or Z from India. They'd come and be very nice and so forth, but then they would have no appeal in the culture.
Yeah.
But Prabhupada had immediate appeal because he was very, very clever culturally in a way that many of them weren't, and he came at a moment in time that could not have been a better time to offer his understandings in a way that these young people could appreciate. So there was a genius there. You know, even apart from the kind of the spiritual aspects that are rightfully pointed to by devotees, apart from all of that, he had something else that ultimately was the decider. You know, a kind of a cultural understanding combined with a context where, known or unknown to him, he stepped into the ideal moment in time in America. Put all that together, and you have a significant movement that we call ISKCON.
Thank you. And so I agree with you completely. And now throughout the world, we have the temples, we have the farm communities like New Vrindavan, where we are sitting right now, and it is influencing many countries, many people. Initially started with North America and United States.
Yes.
As a neurologist, I usually have conversations still today. Actually, it happened maybe in last 1 to 2 weeks with my colleague in the hospital. That I have a big house, I have 2 cars, I have children, and what is the purpose of the life? So this basic question, what is the purpose of the life? Who am I? And what is my ultimate duty? These questions will stand there as long as there is humanity on this planet.
I agree, absolutely.
So the answer for that questions will be the same 5,000 years back and 5,000 years down the line. You know, so many celebrities, so many great leaders got inspiration from Bhagavad Gita. So I think Prabhupada, as you mentioned, it's been there for a long time, but in the name of modernization, we forget our roots.
Yeah.
So the one other point I want to stress is Prabhupada's teacher, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, asked him to go to West and share this knowledge in 1920s. Again, we can call superpower God or Krishna. Prabhupada Guru chanted 10 million names of Krishna's name, chanting Hare Krishna. And even Prabhupada's Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's father, Bhakti Vinod. Yeah. So he in 1800 started correspondence with Western universities, writing letters and all this. So what devotees, even the scriptures were telling that there will be a spiritual ambassador to the whole world. So he came at a perfect time when even though his guru gave the instruction in his teens, where he's very strong, money is there, everything is there, but somehow he started in 1965 at age 69 in that ship for 60 days with 2 heart attacks on the journey. So sometimes when I see as like an ordinary person who travels non-stop flight for 20 hours, I complain 1 week saying, oh, I had a bad flight.
Yes.
Sometimes I strongly believe this is something more than human thinking, that spiritual connection is there, where he came at a perfect time with perfect message. And the other thing is, in India, people always follow when it comes from West. In that way, when I know Bhagavad Gita from my childhood,
Yes.
but I never saw the way I see now. That last 3 years, the way I see things changed. But I know these things from 30 plus years.
Yeah.
So in that way, I think Prabhupada's contributions to this world is phenomenal, and it will keep going. We are only seeing 50 years. I think it's still a small baby, ISKCON, and maybe we'll talk 50 years, 100 years down the line, how much big impact. So those are my realizations of. I just want to add one more thing. It's more than a friendly chat rather than an interview. That's how it's going on. So I agree with you completely. All the right thing, right time, right place, right circumstances. but most importantly, his faith in his guru's words. Who in this world these days, when you were talking about our oaths or our commitments.
Yes.
He just whatever his guru said 40 years back, that is his driving force.
Yeah.
And even on the ship, the second driving force for him is faith on Krishna. I have 2 heart attacks. I don't have any doctor, but you have a bigger purpose.
Yes.
So I have complete faith. And he wrote a letter just before coming to Boston. I'm just a puppet. Make me dance, make me dance, make me dance.
Krishna, do with me what you will.
Yes,
Yeah.
most insignificant beggar.
That's right.
So there's so many factors. Of course, he is Prabhupada. He knows how to, talk and how to significant insights. But on top of that, the 2 things is faith in Krishna and faith in his guru's words, and of course, his divine grace.
Yes, and his disciples saw that.
Yes,
They
yes,
saw that.
They saw that.
Yeah, they saw that. And it was appealing.
And this eternal, somebody who is very genuine, as you said, during those times, gurus were coming into the Upper East Side of Manhattan, but he went to the poorest of the poorest slums in New York City,
That's right.
Bowery. So some genuinity and some purity and some. Anyways, we are seeing the positive things, but you saw the growing pains of a small baby in ISKCON. What do you think? As we start walking, we fall down. That's how you start.
That's right.
Crawling, walking. But you saw this movement for last 40 years. And I think you are the only researcher who studied this length. So I have a great privilege even to ask this question. So what are your thoughts of this growing pains and where the ISKCON is right now in 2018 October?
You're right about 2 things. One, there were growing pains. And ISKCON has certainly moved beyond those growing pains. The growing pains, I think from a devotee's point of view, somehow devotees will say something to me like, ISKCON must be very peculiar. Look at all the mistakes that we have made. Why are we suffering so much with all this trouble when surely the rest of the world doesn't face things like this? Well, that proves to be absolutely false. Any organization, and it doesn't have to even be a religious organization, it can be a business organization, or whatever. It has growing pains in the beginning. Things don't start off, wonderfully. There's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of hard work, there are a lot of mistakes, there's a few successes along the way that buoys people's spirits and keep them going, even in the face of difficulty. So all that's true. I could enumerate all the things that happened to ISKCON. But the story, I think, the big story is we've just celebrated its 50th year of existence. Yes. Yes. Simply Wonderful is being used there in a couple of different ways, obviously, but it's actually Simply Wonderful that it has existed over 50 years of existence. There was a study that was done on 19th century communes. Many of them were religious. There were very few that managed to exist for one generation. And this particular scholar, Roosevelt Cantor, is quite a well-known sociologist. She defined a generation as 17 years. The great majority of these groups, as I say, some were religious, some were more psychological, some were more economic and focused. They failed and failed rather quickly. And I think it endured in part because of Prabhupada's leadership, but also because there was a deep philosophy that basically held people together, that made people realize that there was nothing here that was other than truthful. There was nothing here that was other than going to lead them back to Godhead. There was nothing here that was going to do anything other than allow them to create what they thought would be an ideal community. And these were things that bound people together and allowed them to endure even in the worst of times. And those times were certainly there. So I think now, if we look at the devotees that are in the movement themselves, they've gone through all that. The old timers, you know, that have been in the movement for 40 years or more, 30 years or more, they are here for a reason, and that reason has to do with Prabhupada. When Prabhupada was preaching, these aren't foolish people, you know. So I think it is vital and strong. I think it is changing in the sense that, as I talked earlier today, that there aren't nearly as many Western people, and the movement has not been all that successful, at least in this country, and inspiring a new generation to be attracted to Krishna and be attracted to ISKCON. Yes, there are many people that are ethnic Hindus, that are immigrants to this country and their families, who have become very much attached and very, very much impressed by ISKCON, who are filling the temples in this country. I think the big challenge ahead, as far as I can see, is keeping or attracting more and more Westerners. Prabhupada came to this country for a purpose. He wanted to spread Krishna consciousness to the West. And so I think it's important to find ways to reach out to more Westerners. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with the fact that there are Indian and other ethnic Indian people attracted to ISKCON. All that's well and good, but not at the expense of dedicating oneself and the movement dedicating itself to fulfilling Prabhupada's promise of trying to attract Western people. And as you said earlier, people in India themselves have been impressed by what ISKCON has done and have become more impressed about Prabhupada's success and about Prabhupada himself because what he's done. In fact, part of Prabhupada's plan was if I can bring Krishna consciousness to the West and Westerners will be attracted, then when I go back to India, the Indian people will see that success and they will renew their own commitments to their faith. It won't be something that's just in the culture. Everybody knows about Hinduism in India, but the question is how many of them have committed themselves in a way to that practice and to that particular faith that they have grown up with all their lives. And Prabhupada saw that as the potential, ultimately, that he would, in a sense, conquer America, if you will. It's a little strong term. But that very success would translate into Indian people also renewing their faith, some of them becoming associated with ISKCON, but even if they did not, they could have pride in their own culture and they could have pride in their own faith as a consequence of what Prabhupada had done. And I think that is what happened, and that continues to happen.
So I am the example of that.
You are an example.
I am the example,
Yeah.
and my life completely changed, and that I have a clear direction. I know Bhagavad Gita from 2 years or 3 years. The book is there, but I don't know the significance. Now I am reading those books and I am giving classes and I am sharing this knowledge. So I think, this is, Prabhupada said, we are spirit souls. It is the knowledge he brought is irrespective of time, place, circumstance, gender, caste, religion, color. This is universal knowledge. I think I came to this, able to come into this moment like this is because I got this knowledge in America. If I am in India, maybe I never, because as you are in this country, you have your own challenges, and this knowledge is kind of very rescuing, like Nelson Mandela said, during my ray of hope in the jail is Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
Albert Einstein, every morning I bathe in the unlimited knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Very nicely said. Very nicely.
Let me make one other point. Using your own experience, what we find there's a scholar who's at Syracuse. She's an Indian woman. She happens to be Christian, not Hindu actually, but she writes about Hindus as well as Christian Indians in America. And she wrote this paper years ago about immigrant Hindus in America. and the title of the paper was, "We Are Better Hindus Here."
Mhm.
And in a sense, you know, when some of these folks were in India itself, Hinduism wasn't something that you had to work at. Hinduism was kind of in the air, so to speak. It was part of Indian culture. So in a certain kind of way, even though they were, these immigrants, and here I'm just talking in general terms, they knew about the Bhagavad Gita, they knew about Hinduism, but that didn't mean they had any depth kind of understanding about it, right?
Yes.
So coming here as immigrants, they get the awkward question like, well, what's Hinduism about? Well, that means you need to know something about Hinduism on the one hand. And also, I think a big piece of this is that immigrant people in general, whether they're ethnic Hindus or not, religion becomes important to them, particularly since, you know, immigrants coming in the latter part of the 19th century and the early part of the 20th century, there were ethnic enclaves that existed. So all the Italians in Boston lived in North Boston. The Irish, my father was the product of Irish immigrants in the Bronx. And the people that he lived around were also Irish, and they were also Catholic, right? And the Catholic Church was organized into ethnic parishes, so that there was a parish for, you know, Italians, there was a parish for other European groups that were predominantly Catholic. So what happened with the immigrants who came from India was something a little different, because there weren't ethnic enclaves that were enclaves of other Indian people. Why is that? Well, one, there's the general trend where that's not happened, but also think about who these Indian people were. They were professional people. They weren't the Italians who came here to get any kind of job they could for the betterment of their family back in Italy. No, these were professional people, and where did they live? Well, they lived in the suburbs next to you and other people in those suburbs. So there was no community per se. So how do you maintain a sense of ethnic identity in the absence of other Indian people? Well, you go to a temple, right? And when the immigration came in '65, opened up in '65, and we had these waves of Indian people coming, ISKCON was the organization that was providing those Hindu temples. There were very few Hindu temples in America at that point. And where did they go? They went to ISKCON, right? And they went to ISKCON, and in time they went to other Hindu temples, because that was a cultural experience as much as a religious experience. That there they could maintain their ethnic identity in the association of other people who were also Indian, and while they were doing that, they were becoming better Hindus. Right? No matter what sect of Hinduism they practiced in India, they were joined together, because this was the place to go to maintain that identity. So religion and identity for immigrant people is always important. ISKCON played a vitally important role from the beginning, even though in the beginning the devotees were kind of perplexed by it, and they weren't paying a whole lot of attention to the Indian people, but they just kept on coming. Right? And so religion becomes critical to immigrants, and played a particularly critical role for Indian and subsequently other Hindu people that came from other parts of the world. But they were a different group of immigrants than the early immigrants who came to this country.
I agree with you. I mean, as I said, I'm the example of that. And the biggest thing back home when I was in India is there is no signs of spirituality. You know, you have to do like this. You have to go to this store.
Yeah.
But Prabhupada, the way he wrote these books is perfect, practical, scientific basis. And it's a way of living. Out of all the things you mentioned, the core is Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. When we open these books, this knowledge is eternal. It will be stand truth 10,000 years
10,000.
after this. So, that is the core, and after, surrounding the core, you know, many people comes to the temples for excellent prasadam. It all starts how you go to temple is for prasadam. As part of prasadam, You go to class, eventually after
That's
1-2
right.
years,
That's right.
and then you make friends,
Yeah.
and you become part of that organization. So the way, the whole thing, you can call how Krishna designed it, or Srila Prabhupada planned it. It's perfect way to attract people with a sweet rap around the thing. So yeah, very nicely said. Now I have a very solid understanding of why I have to do things and what is the purpose of each and everything. Let me, with that background, now you see where the world is going, right? The discussions at a national level and the intense greed, intense fight. Do you think the message of Bhagavad Gita is very helpful to, help to make individuals better, communities better, nations better? What do you think?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think other religious faiths, to the extent that people practice them sincerely, are also going to provide a certain kind of moral base that, unfortunately, in America at this particular time, and not to get political, but I think we're in a time right now where we need that moral guidance more than ever. So whether it's the Bhagavad Gita or whether it's the Bible or whatever scripture that one may choose to follow or to read and accept in their lives, this becomes the moral fiber of any particular community. And I feel base and fiber wherever it comes from, but it's got to come. And the Bhagavad Gita is one of those sources. But there are others, and we have to remain true, and we have to remain determined that is going to be the basis of our way of life. Otherwise, I think we're in deep trouble.
I agree with you completely. When Srila Prabhupada came to America, one of the reporters said, are you planning to convert everybody to Hindus? No. I'm here to make them better Hindus, better Christians, better Muslims. So that is the key. He said, if you know the address of the God, you know the form and name of the God, you can chant any name.
That's right.
So thank you for opening. I don't even want to utter the political words, to be. But it's very important to be as an intellectual class. We have to think about these things, and especially the retreat that's going on this weekend is one of its kind in the history of ISKCON, and it's very important. I think so far in my 30 plus years, nobody talked about everybody think man he knows he will take it, but as it's a 21st century, we have our own challenges. So I think this weekend is very special in many ways, and you have a lot of association with New Vrindavan. So I want to hear, especially we had an excellent Golden Jubilee celebration last weekend, and we invited all those wonderful Vaishnavas, devotees who served from 1969 onwards here. So please tell us your association with New Vrindavan and why it is so special to you.
Well, I think the specialness to me is partially just personal. I know its history, and its history has its dark moments as well as its successes that I think are extraordinary in their own right. Just over our shoulder,
Yes.
is Prabhupada's palace, which is really a miraculous kind of achievement, given that we had young, unexperienced, young people that were here that built that palace who had no skills at all to think that they could achieve that. So there was something deep in their hearts, i.e. their commitment to Prabhupada and their desire above all to do something that was going to please their guru and was going to promote their guru. And that palace was the beginning of what they imagined to be a series of 7 temples on 7 hills. And this community was dedicated to that like no other. And its success, its early success, was admired all the way throughout ISKCON because when other communities began facing their own struggles, New Vrindavan was continuing on quite successfully, and devotees from other places were being attracted here as a consequence of that. So partially it was the vision that was here, and it was a vision that came directly from Prabhupada. You know, when Prabhupada first came here, after Kirtananda founded the community and some devotees started coming, you know, he came here and he laid out that vision. You know, 7 temples, 7 hills. He was even directing, you know, this hill, if you take the top off of this mountain hill, you can you can build a temple here, and here you can do this, and here you can do that. So he had a vision for the whole thing. And Kirtananda Maharaj took that as his life's work. And we can say all kinds of things about Kirtananda, but I have no doubt that he was dedicated to that, not just for himself, but because that's what his guru wanted, and he was going to fulfill it. Yes. And that's what he aspired to do. The other thing that I just deeply admire is the young people that came here were very much of my generation and very much of my age. And they came here with accepting the vision, because New Vrindavan offered an opportunity to build a Vaishnava community that was going to be a model to the world. It wasn't just these temples that people would be attracted to, but they were going to create a way of life. In fact, Prabhupada's vision was, we build these temples and people will come. But what we really want is not only that, we want them to see the virtues of living as a Vaishnava. And we want them to come, be drawn by the architecture and the beauty of these temples. But in the end, they need to understand the way we live, because if they understand the way we live, they'll understand the philosophy upon which is the basis of the way that we live. So these young folks that came were dedicated in a way that, under the worst living conditions, you know, it was very difficult here. It was just crude, and only the hardiest souls came here in those days. If you were at all, you know, faint in the sense of living conditions that were harsh, you would never come here. And so there was a dedication for people here who were willing to deal with all the austerities that were here, and they were many, to accomplish something for their guru, to accomplish something for themselves, and to glorify Prabhupada and to glorify Krishna. And that was in some ways in other places for sure, ISKCON temples, but nothing compared to what went on here. And so I admire in the deepest kind of way those early pioneers of this community had something that I don't have, but I can't help but feeling I wish I did. And so they did something really extraordinary, I think. And even today, I think there are devotees that are still living here that have been here for over 40 years. They've not given up the vision. They've become better devotees from being here. And they see that they have made contributions to Prabhupada's vision, whatever the outcome. They realize they participated in that and become better devotees because of that. So it's a special place. And I just say for me personally, and I said this earlier today, when I come to New Vrindavan, I know that Krishna resides here. You know,
yes,
and you may say, it may just reveal what a
yes.
neophyte I am, but you know, I go to other ISKCON temples,
yes, yes.
and I appreciate being there.
Yes.
But here I know Krishna resides.
Yes.
He resides here.
Yes.
You know, so if I want to go to the source,
Yes.
I come here
Yes.
because I feel that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Vrindavan, the name is. Have you been to Vrindavan in
I
India?
have, just once.
Once. So Prabhupada, the pure devotees mercy, they bring. There is a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam where devotees carry their holy places personified. They can bring that holy place from India to that place.
Yes.
So that is the same replication, New Vrindavan.
Yes, and in fact, Prabhupada was very anxious from the very beginning to start a farm community that would become New Vrindavan. There were other possibilities. This was not the first and only possibility for New Vrindavan. There were others who were looking for land to start what was going to become New Vrindavan. It's just that this particular piece of land in West Virginia Kirtananda found and was able to claim, if you will, for ISKCON, received the name New Vrindavan. So Prabhupada's vision, it wasn't that somebody came up with a piece of land and Prabhupada thought, oh, nice, we'll just make a New Vrindavan. No, 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 no. He had a plan right from the beginning. He wanted to create a farm community that would be a replica of Vrindavan itself, and that the Americans would be attracted to, because that was the ultimate. It was the big Sankirtan, that to be able to create something here at New Vrindavan that would attract people. You didn't have to go out into the streets, although they did that too.
Yes.
That people would be drawn here if you can simply act out this vision that I had of these temples. People will be drawn here by the droves. And I'm not just talking about the other devotees, I'm not just talking about Indian people, I'm talking about anybody and everybody.
Yes.
So he had that vision. It was his vision. It wasn't somebody else. It was his.
When did you came to Vrindavan for the first time?
The one and only time I came was in 1995, when I was working on the centennial celebration. There were preparations going on for that. And I was asked by Lokanath Maharaj to put together a survey, some of the results of which I reported on this morning. And there I was invited to come to Mayapur and to work on that survey there, but also to report to the GBC members about what we were doing and to make visible what we were doing. While I was there, I went from Mayapur, I went to Vrindavan, and I only stayed a matter of a few days, but I got a sense of the place. There's no doubt. And it was a very eye-opening and wonderful experience for me, actually.
Thank you so much. This is, I think, a historical talk or a historical interview that especially, giving the opportunity to speak with you today. And one more very important thing is I humbly request that research is very important as a physician, as a neuroscientist. So I humbly request you to mentor future generation of researchers, especially in this movement. Thank you so much.
I like that. Thank you.
Thank
it's
you.
really nice talking to you.
Thank you.